Welcome to Scars to Stars, where conversations and personal stories let us know we are not alone. In this show, you will meet authors and speakers from our books and events as they share vulnerable personal stories to spread hope and inspire you through adversities in your own life. The world is a difficult place. You will find like-minded people here with kind hearts and supportive souls. I am your host, Dina Brown Mitchell. I am a suicide survivor and the founder of the Realize Foundation. I am so glad you are here. Let's dig into this meaningful conversation. Hi, everybody. It's Dina at the Realize Foundation. And you guessed it, I have a new guest for you, and her name is Lori Lang. She lives in British Columbia, Canada. And I'm so excited to have her here to tell her story. So welcome, Lori.
Thanks, Tina. I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about my story. It starts out with me as a young child, and I grew up with a little sense of self. I feared everything, and I spent a lot of my time underneath the covers at night, cowering. I was very shy and insecure and convinced that I wasn't worth much. When I went to school, I was bullied by a lot of people. There was constant bullying and rejection at school as my peers mocked me. And even the teachers and administrators were not on board with helping me. So there were a lot of things that happened, but I won't go into a lot of that. But I will mention that I was forced to do things that I didn't agree with by the teachers. I was little things like I wasn't given Valentine cards from other students, but one year I actually remember receiving a Valentine card, my one and only card I'd received my whole time in school, in elementary school, and the picture was of an elephant. So I was called ugly, stupid, and fatso all the time, and I became very depressed and discouraged. But I usually when you live at home, you kind of have a way of escaping. But at home, the bullying continued, and I was the brunt of my father's cruel jokes. His two favorites, which he used frequently, were "You're two axe handles across the beam," referring to my backside, of course, and "We'll have to go to Omar, the tent maker, to get clothes made for you." He thought the jokes were funny, but I felt hurt. Um, Constant criticism at meals every day, every night, and even though I tried to do my best, I could never please my parents. Um, by by age 8, I actually struggled with feelings of hatred toward my father, but I knew it was wrong, and I asked God for help to forgive him, and I began to resent and pity him instead. Um, My mother was a workaholic, and there was a huge amount of work to do on the family farm. And so I became a victim and a rescuer, interchanging between the two roles, receiving emotional and later physical abuse at my father's hands and trying to help my mother finish never-ending tasks. And I was unable to measure up to parental expectations, so I became a people pleaser to gain favor and avoid disapproval. Um, Up until grade 6, I had no friends except one, and that was Jesus. He was my faithful friend, and he kept me from giving up on life. If it hadn't been for him, I would not have made it. In every difficulty, I could turn to him for comfort and help and commit and communion. He gave me everything I needed. However, I still felt deprived of human friendship. One day on the playground, a girl pinned my arm behind my back and slapped my face really hard. There were two girls there who didn't agree with the bully's behavior, and so we became good friends after that. In high school, our group grew to around 8 girls who sat together at lunchtime. Didn't really have anything much else to do with them, but I had a teacher who encouraged me in my studies, especially in writing, and I soon pursued academic excellence. I had found a tenuous identity, and my self-esteem somewhat increased. When I was a young adult, I actually was newly married, and my mother was outside working for over 12 hours, and I followed her around, helping her with various tasks, having already worked a very long workday myself. It was getting dark when she finally said to me, "Go inside, I'll be right in." So I entered the house and walked to the living room where my siblings and father were watching a hockey game. My father looked out the window and saw Mom out in the garden working. He immediately yelled at me, "Why aren't you out there helping your mother?" When I tried to explain, he cut me off. I left the house feeling humiliated and emotionally exhausted. So I left home. I spent over a decade attending post secondary education from one institute and university to another. And unfortunately, I became the target of ongoing sexual assaults, which I unsuccessfully tried to stop. I did fight very hard, but I was also fearful that they would kill me. So I had a really hard time with that. I My experience did crush my soul, and my self-awareness and confidence decreased substantially. After an incredibly heinous attack, I became pregnant. I blamed myself and experienced much guilt and shame. And I thought, if I'd only done this or not done that, if only I'd not been afraid, if I'm not on and on, the replay went in my mind. Um, After this incident, I was rejected by my parents, especially my father, who called me names multiple times. In the story, in book 5, I actually mentioned that. And he threatened to disown me if I did not get an abortion. And my mother agreed, and I felt very alone. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't see any escape route. I was completely devastated, and at that time considered killing myself. I struggled with feeling and thinking that Jesus had not protected me. And my once vibrant and compassionate smile disappeared. I returned to university, and unfortunately, the sexual predators also returned to pursue me, but this time I no longer had the strength to fight against them. Learned helplessness overwhelmed me. One day I was standing and waiting for the bus at the university when a man said to me, "I think I've seen you here before." I looked behind me to see who he was talking to, thinking that perhaps his statement might be a pickup line. But I was desperate and feeling very low and not knowing how to defend myself or who to turn to. High Heel, I'll call him High Heel, was sympathetic and confident. But later I discovered he was an angry and often violent man and a narcissist. Talking with him on the bus ride home that day, for the first time, he seemed familiar and someone I had known forever. More importantly to me at that time, he scared the predators away. Briefly, I felt protected. At my mother's and her neighbor's insistence, I married him. After only knowing him for 3 months, eventually I realized that there were red flags and that he was mentally and emotionally unstable. But I thought this was God's way of rescuing me. And I continued to have a strong faith in Jesus Christ. And at the beginning, my husband pretended to become a Christian in order to marry me. However, by the end of our first 4 years of marriage, he declared that he was an atheist and isolated me from family and from church. For the first long years, I found myself in tears several times a day, locked in constant struggle with High Heel to preserve even the smallest fragment of who I was. And my husband's control was extreme. I rarely could go anywhere without him, and I feared him deeply. He used anger, violence, and physical abuse, such as push me to the ground, driving at extremely high speeds, shooting a rifle bullet at my feet to intimidate and manipulate me. And I just was desperate. He used crazy making, and I eventually succumbed to his complete control, yielding to his every whim because I was physically, spiritually, and emotionally exhausted and beaten down, unable to keep fighting. High Heel dragged us into pastimes I hated. I pretended that I was happy in our relationship for the sake of our marriage. My belief that divorce was wrong and my fear of my family rejection if I left held me hostage. My mother's saying was, if you make your bed, you must lie in it. Over time, my emotions flatlined, and I felt as though a wall had formed between the hemispheres of my brain. Um, I no longer cared whether I lived or died. The most difficult transition was the loss of my faith in Jesus Christ. Once I had believed Jesus and I were inseparable, now I began to believe that God no longer wanted or accepted me and was punishing me as I sank deeper and deeper into degradation at my husband's hands. I was no longer able to pray. My mind couldn't think. Heaven fell silent, and so did my soul. Where once I saw the brightness of the heavenly sky, the darkest storm clouds rolled into place, blocking the light and plunging everything into seemingly eternal obscurity. I truly wanted to die and had consigned myself to hell. I unknowingly took God's place as judge, and I showed myself no mercy. Suicide doesn't always appear as immediate death. It can take the form of a living death and a spiritual resignation to hell and darkness. To me, this was the ultimate death which I felt I deserved. Near the end of our relationship, I sensed that physical death and hell were just around the corner. But God, however, had other plans for me.
Hi there, it's Dina. If you like our podcast and you're enjoying learning about other people's stories of overcoming adversity, please go over to therealizefoundation.org and support us by donating. We believe that conversations, community, and personal story can change lives and reduce suicide ideation. And we also have a way, if you have a business, you can support us without money out of your pocket. So go on over to realizefoundation.org and look at the donate page, and you can learn how to support us as a business, and also you can donate any amount. Thank you so much.
8 years after as I sat on our bed during one of High Hill's violent episodes of yelling and throwing a wine glass into a nearby fireplace to intimidate me, I looked with glazed eyes into his, daring him to kill me. Instead, we moved again, and I returned to the same university, and he began searching in the newspaper for another woman. He soon found somebody and talked to her about his terrible wife and by telephone, and then decided to meet her. And for the sake of our relationship, I hoped he would reject her, but several hours after he met her, he returned to our apartment saying he loved the other woman and no longer loved me. I suggested marriage counseling. He refused. I was saddened by his misuse of my car as a brothel. And for 10 harrowing days, I tried to stay in our apartment because I didn't know who to turn to, and I had no money. And it was really hard because High Hill spent the nights at his girlfriend's place, but during the day, they left evidence of their adultery everywhere in my bedroom and in the bed I slept in. I was sick to my stomach and heart. One good thing was I lost 10 pounds, but I almost failed the 2 courses I was taking at university. But God was gracious. He sent 2 angels to me, my cousin and my sister. I was mortified to tell anyone what had happened in my marriage. When my cousin phoned me and asked to use our apartment pool, I broke down and told her what had occurred. She offered to let me stay with her during the week to continue my education courses. A little while later, my sister came to visit me and offered to let me stay with them on the weekends. And after 10 days in that place, my sister helped me move out of the apartment. I felt numb and mortified. And then when we finally got divorced, it was even worse. Yet when my exposure to the maltreatment ended, my mind began to heal. But to this day, my body retains the vestiges of the stress brought on by abuse. I have fibromyalgia and CFS. Um, I did complete my professional development training as a teacher, and I was hired by a school district. And actually, I moved to another location in a beautiful place overlooking the ocean. Waves of healing washed over me in this environment as I viewed the sea and walked along the beach. And Jesus restored his relationship with me, or my relationship with him too. I began to read my Bible and pray daily as I'd done before. He also renewed my fellowship with other believers, using a garage saleswoman at a local high school. Over a table of used clothing, toys, and other items, she invited me to attend church in a school building. And the Lord did help me to overcome my fear of rejection and my shame of divorce. And I returned to church where the Lord helped me to slowly heal and grow. And it has been 3 decades since my divorce, and I thank God for all that he has done. He actually, even though I didn't have my own children, he actually gave me hundreds of school children in 2 nations, in Canada and in Peru, where I worked for 5 years. And Jesus has always been my faithful friend. Over the years, my relationship with him has grown as I learned to trust him more deeply. And at times I have struggled, wondering why God did not seem to be there. But truly, I realized he was, waiting for the right time to bring me home. My life was unfurled, and I titled the chapter of the book, A Life Unfurled. And my life was unfurled from a place of confinement and misery into the freedom of becoming who I was created to be. I went from a woman who had no sense of self, who I was, to someone who knew that she was loved and accepted. And I was reminded by Jesus of his promise in Hebrews 13:5 that he will never leave me nor forsake me. No matter where I've been, he kept his promise and brought me back to himself. And since then, he has led me into a lot of different adventures as a teacher, a counselor, a missionary, and many more. And he is the only reason why I'm alive and abundantly alive now. If he could do it for me, he can do it for anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, for sharing that. I think I can also say that I'm the only reason, or he is the only reason I'm alive as well. um, so we can share that. Um, so it's almost like the lady that your ex-husband found was also a saving grace for you, even though it wasn't easy, I'm sure. But it just, listening to the story, it sounds like that was a blessing from God to get you out of that situation.
Yes, he had actually promised me before I even got married that he was going to rescue me, although I didn't understand it at the time. Mm-hmm. That is in my story, but I didn't say it out loud here.
Yeah.
But I felt sorry for her, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I always wonder, like, what is it in people that make them so mean? Like, was it, I don't know what you know about his upbringing or his family, but, I don't know if it has something to do with that. And it's really not any of my business, but I just feel like when people are mean and abusive, it makes me wonder what they've been through to get to that place, just like you as a kid with your dad, and you're such a kind person.
Thank you, Dina. Mm-hmm. I try to be, but it's only because of my relationship with Jesus that I try really hard to be. I know when I went to a classroom reunion last year, mm-hmm. A woman there said a couple times to me, you were known in high school for your kindness. I thought, wow, I hope I still have it.
Well, you do. That's for sure. You do. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to get to know you, and I think I've always thought that you were very kind, but I didn't always know your whole story. So I'm glad you shared it with us, and I'm excited that you're writing in book 5.
Yes, me
How is
too.
it, how has it been for you writing that story? I don't know if you've done that before, but if it's the first time you're writing about it, how was that experience for you?
Well, I did get a counseling degree, a master's in counseling psychology. So I have written the story in various ways over the years. But when I moved to a different place, I actually destroyed all the writing. I shredded it all because I didn't want it to fall into anyone's hands.
Oh,
So, no, I'm glad to be able to do it. I, I don't know if you want me to answer the question um,
sure,
about my participation in the book project.
sure.
Uh, I was really excited to be a part of the book project community, but I was also afraid to write my chapter. And it was actually very great to overcome my fear of the what ifs.
Hmm.
Uh, it was like the last chapter of experiencing controlling fear of the people who tried to hold me down before. Now, I also thought about the fact that people have asked me since I've written this story if, they think I perhaps have not forgiven my father or my ex-husband. I have. I've completely forgiven them. My purpose in writing is just because I want people to know that there is hope out there. And I want my experience to help others.
Yes. And it's true that it does that, because I think through this podcast and our books, it's a way that people can hear or read something that helps them without having to ask for help. And I think that's the main purpose of our mission, is like, how can somebody know they're not alone and have hope without having to tell somebody what's going on or ask for help. And I think that is a really big deal. It was a big deal in my own journey, and I think it has been in a lot of our readers and writers and podcast guests. I think it's a kind of a blanket mission we have, and people who are silent and struggling have a way to connect with somebody or connect with a story that helps them have that hope to keep going.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah. So when you the several times you mentioned when you were, wanting to take your life, what stopped you?
I just felt there was still a part of me that loved God, and um, I didn't want to displease Him either. Because I was a people pleaser, I was also a God pleaser,
Mhm.
and I just felt like He would not be pleased with that. It's not that it got pretty bad, and I could have. And I'm not when I say that, I'm not saying that God can make the difference for everybody. I'm not saying that He will stop people from taking their life or whatever, um, but for me personally, it was just a case of not wanting to do something that I thought was wrong.
Mhm.
And for me, I'm not saying it against
Yeah.
anyone else.
No, I understand. I think everybody's beliefs are personal to them, and they might have a different philosophy around that. But I was the same. I grew up in church, and my family were Christians, and um, when I had my attempt a long time ago in the 90s, I didn't I didn't think about that, to be honest. It was a really quick decision for me. There was a lot of things involved, and I just wanted the pain to stop. And
Mhm.
after that, my dad sent me a letter with a cross. And that's when I started reading the Bible again and getting back, you know, to my faith. And now it would never be an option for me again because of my faith and because of how I saw how it affected my family and the people who cared about me. So
yes, that was part of it too. I mean, I suppose there was a point where I didn't. There was a point where I didn't really care what my family thought because I couldn't please them, and I realized I couldn't. But I still didn't want to hurt people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I told you you're a kind person.
Well, the pain got pretty deep, so I could have done it, but I don't know. God just kept me from going through with it, right? So.
Well, I really appreciate you being here and sharing, intimate details of your life that can give someone else hope. I'm so happy you joined us for this conversation. My wish is that you found comfort and hope in your own unique situation. If you resonated with our message, please head over to therealizefoundation.org, where you can apply to write your own story in one of our books. You can also download our 60 Ideas for Self-Care on the resources page. I can't wait to hear from you. Until next time, you are not alone, you are worthy, and you are enough.